Good afternoon. I'm mad at myself because I thought I had set this to be let them enter on their own without having to be in a waiting room, but I obviously didn't. So I apologize for that. So that doorbell will keep on ringing here for a while. It's good to see everybody.
Good to see you, Lori.
On a Monday afternoon. What?
Are you meeting in person these days? Are you having school?
I am. I have 3 kids that I'm working with, and 2 of them are back in school. So when they're in school, I see them in school, and when they're out, I see them online. But then one of them stayed remote, but he's going to be exiting soon anyway. So
nice.
Yeah, he's a 2nd grader who just needed a little bit of loving, and he's off and going.
Yay!
He just needed somebody to show him that you gotta do a little work here, buddy. and you know, being online, he had to do a lot of work because you know, like they just have it really that there's a piece of the independence that I think's interesting.
Yes.
You know, for them having to be able to do some things on their own. But yeah.
You can't reach to the screen and do it for them.
No. And that's the crazy part. But then you have to think, like, how am I gonna, he needs to break that word apart. Like how, you know, and so a lot of times I would get out a board and I would write it on there and I would try to show him the parts or whatever. And then one day he's like, I got this. And he put his finger up there and he showed himself the parts. And I was like, we're done. We're good. You're good now, buddy. You can go. But they, you know, it isn't a book. So they don't think that they can do that, or they don't think about doing it like they do, you know, for when they have a book in front of them. But yeah, it's been good. I heard you guys are going to go online here for a while. Is that right?
We are. We have, after today, I think we have 10 days left in person, although our kindergarten class was the first one to have to be quarantined here at our school at Central just this morning. So they went 10 days early, but we had 10 days left in person and then Thanksgiving break. And they're not planning to come back in person for 2020.
So they had to quarantine as a classroom because someone who had been in the classroom.
Yes, apparently so.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. It's just interesting. It's amazing you haven't had someone before now.
Yes. And other schools in our district have had, like even Sarah's class ended up, I think it was last week and the week before, having to quarantine. There was one of her children got COVID and they had to quarantine. So,
okay.
Yep.
It's just it's so interesting, all the different dynamics and the different, I don't know if there are standard rules and regs on all that, but Sophia,
I think every school district is different. Every building, every county, you know, we're making it up as we go along.
And as my good friend says, really, as we make it up, we just go and pick something out of the closet of bad ideas. You know, like you got to do something. Well, I better go to that closet, and it's just filled with bad ideas. So that's all I have to go with. There's no good. Doesn't seem like there's great options for much of this. So make the most of it, I guess. That's all we can ask.
Yeah, I think we're doing some pioneering work here, Lori.
You guys, we are very cutting edge here. Seriously.
Yep.
Seriously, and at a turning point, right? That people will look back on and be like, wow, that really shifted, you know, or refined what education looks like. I don't know, to the good or the bad. I guess that's the worry I have too, you know, some of that. But somebody I was watching on TV was talking about how if education could just figure out how to do things like Peloton. And what he was meaning was Peloton has all of these people who log on, you know, thousands of people, and they find the best of the best instructors, right? And you know, like he was just talking about how, you know, why do we have, you know, 50 fantastic I don't know, algebra teachers when you could have one that everybody tunes into. Okay, so now this is somebody who doesn't do education to think like that, right? But he's like, you know, then you'd have one person, you know, with thousands. He would do his, they don't, I don't think that people who say that realize the interactive, you know, the interaction part. And I said, I think that's all fine. And my thinking, as I was talking to him through the TV screen, was, I think that's all fine and good if somebody knows how to ride a bike, right? But if somebody needed to learn how to ride a bike, being online with 1,000 people is not going to help you learn how to ride a bike down the road, right? You know, so I got his point, but I was like, yeah, there's a part of teaching that we all know, that instant observation, that instant, you know, you teach it, you meander around, you ask questions, you respond. That isn't as simple as people think, that you just get on and give a lecture and everybody gets it. So but it will be interesting. I feel like the learning curve has been huge. So okay, we're about 1:05, and I know your time is precious. I do want to start off by letting everybody know that these tea parties are really a way just to kind of keep us all connected, and give us a time to come together and talk. What I do realize more than ever is that you are stretched thinner than you ever have been before. And so when you have a class, or you have a group of students that fall during this time, you know, my wish is you go do that, right? You go kids first, do that. This tea party is secondary. And I do have it recording. The last few times I didn't have it recording, but I have it recording to share out afterwards. So if you can't attend, you'll still be able to hear the discussion and not have missed everything. But I know you're having to make difficult decisions on how your time is used. So if I'm for however works for you, and it could be this time, a different way that time, next time, and just know that that's okay. Also know that it's okay if you come in and out. You know, we're going to have a discussion, we're going to do a few activities and things like that. So that makes it a little bit harder. But hey, I say we go with the flow, and as people come in and out, I'll try to shove them different places wherever everybody is. And we're all forgiving and giving me grace on how to orchestrate this all, because they didn't teach me this in teacher leader school. And yet what I try to keep in the back of my mind is, it's really the conversation. It's really the opportunity to get together and keep our compass pointing north. Keep it going the same direction, so that a whole year of school, if you're in a different teaching position this year, or if your focus is different, if you haven't started with reading recovery kiddos, I don't want you to feel like you still don't have your mind around that. Or hopefully this keeps you making decisions, even with small groups or with classrooms. If we have any people who are on here that have classrooms now, that just kind of keeps all of Clay's theory and our and what we know about really good literacy instruction in the back of your mind. Does that make sense? And so again, I want it to be a lot of discussion, and I plan for it. However, this I haven't found a great way for that in this setup, because I feel like a lot of people are more hesitant than you would be in our CPD group. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead. Does anyone have anything before I launch into our discussion, or start discussing word work, that you want to ask about, that you're curious about. I have great questions all the time. People emailing me about particular cases that are happening. Also, IDEC questions. If you notice, they're kind of changing that on me all the time too. So sometimes I don't find out about it until somebody emails me and says, hey, there's a question here. And I'm like, oh, let me find that out. So as you explore things, if it seems confusing or new to you, just text me, or email me, and I will try to run that answer down for us. Okay. It always isn't right away, and I do apologize for that as well. But again, a disclaimer is we're always doing our best. Just trying to get by. Sometimes I add to that. Okay, anything else? I can't see everybody at one time. So if you remember, just a simple hitting of the space bar will take you off mute, and then you can ask a question or you can unmute yourself at any time. Really, the only reason for the muting is so that we, the background noise. As you can see, I think we have a pretty small group today. I did know that quite a few people were going to be gone, or, had emailed me, or they're coming in and out. So, whoa, nope, that's not what I wanted to do there. Okay, so if we don't have any questions, and again, use that chat for any questions that you have. Once I kind of move this off to the side so I can see, then I reluctantly can't see you guys. I'll move it over there. There we go. Okay, so today we're going to talk about making sense of word work. And I think when I threw that out as an option to talk about, I'm sure all radars went bing, because as we know, this is the most attended session at any professional development conference you go to. And it's questions all the time that I get from teachers. I myself continue to think around that and try to make sense of what that means and how I can plan for that, so that it is specific for, I'm sorry, there's some academics coming in, that it's specific for the students that I work with, that it does move them, it's right what they need, and yet I often feel like I'm not sure that that's what that did. So my goal for today was to talk about trying to make sense of this, okay? And I came across this quote in Change Over Time that says, children need experience with words in text and words in isolation. Words in continuous text favors learning about word possibilities, while words in isolation favors learning about letter sequences. Okay. Take a minute to think about that. And is there anyone who just kind of wants to share what stands out to you, or what does that quote make you wonder? Or because here's what I also think. I also think that you are doing word work with students throughout a lesson, right? Throughout the entire lesson. If we could sit down, look at a videotape of yourself, we could say, see, that's working with words, that you were working with words there, that you were working with words there, you were supporting him with word work there. And yet, if I said, what are you doing there at the board? Why did you choose that for your board work today? I feel like that's where the questions start. Does that make sense? I feel like when it's embedded in text and you're doing it on the run, that I feel like people are more comfortable with that, or maybe even not realizing how much they're doing of that during that time, but they really question what they're doing in isolation. Yeah? Would you say that's how you feel? Do you have a different stance on that? The two different types of word work? Because that's what we're also going to talk about today, is that there really are, a couple of different ways to think about this. Word word work that is done on the run in continuous text, reading and writing. And then word work that you planned for at the board. Okay, and that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is at the board stuff. And in this quote, it says, words in isolation favors learning about letter sequences. And so, when I read that, I'm thinking about how valuable that is. The isolation, the white space, the colorful letters, the tactile piece of it, the maneuvering, getting them in a certain sequence and sticking hard to that and getting that to be something that's very concrete. While in continuous text, they're encountering it, and they have to kind of pull out all the possibilities they've had, or the things that they've seen or they've encountered before. And that's why on the run like that, a lot of times our prompts are things like, do you see something you know? Right? Or different prompts like that, where you're wanting them to look at what they've come upon and think about the possibilities, think about things they have encountered in text before, in isolation, in writing and reading, and then put it into play. Whereas the isolation is, I'm really getting focused instruction, explicit instruction on letter sequences, that letters make up words. Words have parts. Those parts and those letters have different sounds. And that's what we're doing there, is giving them all those experiences so that when they get in text, they have that to pull from for their possibilities. Does that make sense? Okay. And so as soon as I say that, then we feel like this. Let's watch a little bit of Alice in Wonderland here. I thought when I was watching this movie again, while I was picking this theme for this year, I thought, oh boy, this guy has it. Okay, can you hear that?
I hardly know, sir. I came so many times since this morning, you see.
I do not see. Explain yourself.
I'm afraid I can't explain myself, sir, because I'm not myself, you know.
I do not know.
But I can't put it any more clearly, for it isn't clear to me.
You? Who are you?
Well, don't you think you ought to tell me who you are first?
Okay, so, well, let me try to get back to this. So when I think about that, video, and I think about the caterpillar and all the letters floating around, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm in a sea of word work right here. I feel like I'm at the easel. The letters are coming at me, or I'm having to figure out what letters to use. And yet I'm so confused. I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am as a reading recovery teacher, planning for this and supporting my students with this. Okay, so what I would like you to do for just a minute, well, or 3 minutes, I have 3 minutes of time, that I want you just to find a little place, a blank piece of paper. And I want you to, before we get started, think about, what does word work mean to you? When we talk about word work today, coming into it, where are you with that? What's your comfort level? What's your frustrations? What do you think you're good at? Why do we do it? When do we do it? How do we know what to do? I want you to think about those for a few minutes, and I want you just to write down your thoughts. Okay? So I will be quiet and I'll give you some time. Okay. Hopefully you were able to capture some of your thinking of where you are now. We're just going to take a few minutes just to start some conversation around that. Where are you in your thinking around word work?
Well, Lori, I can jump in. In terms of where I am, it's in terms of, I know that we want to help them understand the flexibility of how words work. However, I'm finding it a little more difficult this year because we're behind on our sight words and some of our sounds and all that. So it's almost like, I don't know if everybody's in a panic mode that we're trying to do too much too soon, that nothing is sticking. And that's kind of where I am. I just feel like I'm having a hard time getting things to stick. And I don't know if it's because I feel pressure to try to make up and I'm trying to go too fast so that it's not known. Well, then they can't use it when they need to.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And everyone, you're welcome to share, to respond to Lisa or to add on to what she says, or give her some ideas or thoughts, or share your thinking.
I'll go ahead. I had what was my first thought was what Lisa had said about flexibility. But also I just tag on there with just taking words apart so that we're noticing and discovering the different patterns and word chunks and sequencing those letter sounds. And
Thank you. How about,
one thing that oh, sorry.
no, I would think, go ahead.
One thing I thought about when I was brainstorming was that the kids get to manipulate. It's a hands-on, they stand up, they're at the board. It's just that hands-on piece. I know they're hands-on because they're writing and reading, but somehow it's just a different sort of construction and just sort of activates a different part of the brain. I don't really know the science of it, but I think it's good. That's all.
But you're right. There is that brain science to that, isn't there? Yeah, the importance of that piece too. How about one more real quick, just to get the ideas going?
Well, I think it's great that they're to be flexible, but what I find right now is I'm trying to get my kids just to do the left to right. They're being flexible, but it's not in the right way. So we put the O first, and then we put the N in front of it for no, and just that whole left to right, and that words have to go in a certain sequence, that you can't be flexible by putting the second letter first and then going back and then maybe putting the third letter at the end, just the whole left to right. And that's kind of where my kids are right now. We haven't moved much past that, but just, you have to write the first letter first. Whatever you hear first comes first. So,
well, and isn't that funny? Because we, and I think about myself too, with throwing out words like flexible and that, and I think about that too. And then having to realize that some things can be flexible and directionality and sequence cannot, right? We have got to be strong, and we've got to be firm on that. And I know when you were in training or even across time, we've talked about how literacy is that only time where it demands that, and it requires that directionality, left to right, top to bottom. Everything else in their sweet little lives is willy-nilly, any direction, whatever the brightest, flashiest thing when they walk into a room is what they see. They do not scan rooms left to right, top to bottom. or anything that they do except for literacy. And so, and that's another thing that I feel like if I'm not, if we're not hardcore and really very structured with that, then they will have that tendency to look wherever, to notice whatever, right? And so some of these activities, some of these steps that we're going to talk about today, that is the purpose. And I'll talk about this later too. A lot of times I think we think that is easy work, and it may be easy, okay, to move letters out of a word left to right, but that's not what we're doing there. I mean, when we put up that word and that child's moving those letters out one at a time, it is not just to see if they can do it. You know, I could put my 2-year-old neighbor up in front of a whiteboard and show them how to move those letters and they can do that. That's not what we're building in the brain. What we're building in the brain is that left to right, scanning across like that so that it will never be done the other way. Okay. And so sometimes I think when we're looking through our book and we get to that step 1, I'm like, woo, they can do that. You know, well, of course they could. They probably could do that before I took them into reading recovery. But the reason that we're doing it is not for them to get good at moving the letters apart. It's to build that tendency, or not even a tendency, to build that rule in their brain that they do that all the time. And that's the way they look. And so if that's easy, that's good, because that means it can get even more solid and more solid and more solid. And I think we do see sometimes when kids do that and it isn't easy. They're grabbing the back of the word. They're doing lots of different things. But even doing it with kids where it does seem easy has that purpose that you're talking about, Chanel. It's getting that solidified. So it's they never do it the other way. Sorry, just let someone in. Okay, let's get going then. Thank you for sharing, and I'm going to make sure that I've got so many screens open here, girls. Okay, so and like I said, oh no, we don't have the timer going. Nope. Sorry. Okay, so one of the quotes that the caterpillar says, when in the caterpillar scene in Alice in Wonderland, is this quote that says, "It would be nice if something made sense for a change." Whoa, is that not the bumper sticker for 2020? And yet I think it's really a good bumper sticker for word study and word work. And so today the focus here, like you see, is to spend time in literacy lessons to see what Clay is saying about word work, to see where we need to go. And honestly, I don't think there's going to be anything today that you say, whoa, I've never heard that before. But what I'm hoping that you leave for today with is the idea that I've never thought of it that way before. And hopefully that will help foster your ability to make really good decisions for that word work time. And the 3 areas that we're going to talk about today, I have here in bold. We're going to talk about the importance of extending a meager knowledge of words. Key. And like Lisa said, doing it in a way that's going to make it stick. And there could be lots of reasons things aren't sticking in 2020, but I think we see this in other years too, where we're trying to build up that reading vocabulary, and it's a hard time coming. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about learning to look at print, which is in that chapter 3. It's in that first, foundations of our book. And then we're also going to take a look at using visual information, that print, efficiently and effectively. And so again, I do
Lori,
yeah.
I think you're not sharing the right screen with us. We're seeing the match high frequency word to the text level. Is that what we're supposed to be seeing?
No, thank you. No, you're not. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, let me stop sharing. wonder why that's sharing right now. Let's go back to this again and start over. Thank you. Just so you know, Chanel, how nice of you to stop me, because I was doing a presentation for PDS students and I was about 10 screens in. And finally the ISU teacher says, I don't think we're seeing the screen you're talking from. I'm like, why didn't you tell me? If you would have been a kid, you would have told me the first screen you realized, but adults are so sweet. Okay. Now, there you go. So you're thinking, I see nothing in bold. What are you talking about? Is that better? Now do you see like a making sense of word work screen? Thank you. Please help me through this. Okay, so we're talking about the 2 to 3 minutes of each lesson that is allotted to this, okay? Like I said at the beginning, we are not talking about the multitude of word work that you and the student are working through in the other 27 minutes of the lesson. And I'm telling you, it's happening all the way through. Today is talking about at the board, those 2 to 3 minutes, okay? And so not only are we teaching them different things, but like we talked about at the beginning here, we're also wanting them to learn these behaviors or to feel this way about it. We want things to be quick. We want things to be our wording, our prompting. It needs to be precise and explicit and focused. I think too, one of the things that happens to me is I'm doing too much. I'm when I go to the board, I've got all these great ideas. You know, I've taken time to think about them. I'm going to do them. And yet, if I'm honest with myself, am I precise? Have I chiseled down to what's going to be the most important piece of this that they need to do? And we need to do it. They need to see it. They need to have control over manipulating and doing that. And then in the best of situations, then I'm able to link that back to something they've done in reading and writing continuous text, right? So that they see that transfer, that this isn't something I just did with Mrs. Stevens at the board, that this is going to help me when I'm doing this in text, okay? And so we want to help them make those connections as well. But this is some foundational thinking or some work for them that we're trying to make very explicit and to showcase that. So then, you say to me, well, okay, well, I know I want them to do all of this, but how do we know what to do? How do I know what to plan for? What, for lack of a better word, can I use the word like activity, or probably a better one would be procedure, right? As opposed to an activity. But how are we going to know what to do? And just like in church, the answer always is Jesus. In reading recovery, the answer is always the child, okay? And you're all like, oh, that doesn't help me. That does not help me figure out what to do during word work. And I want to show you today how, let's try to make it that way, right? Let's think about it this way. Because when we're thinking about the child, there are things that is important learning for all children. For all the kiddos who come into reading recovery with me, I know that I am going to have to be focused on these things. And this is what I think those things are. I think those things are things like making sure and ensuring that they have an extensive or developing knowledge of words, their reading vocabulary. And of course, I'm always checking that in writing as well, but I need to make sure that reading vocabulary is giving them access to words they're going to see in their books, okay? And those books early on, I'm talking early on in lessons, early on in a lesson series, this is where I'm looking. Do they have the words they need to be successful in the text level they're working in, okay? So, how we say to kids, you don't have to remember it, just read it. Okay. Well, I'm going to kind of, alter that a little bit. Is there are things they have to remember. They have to remember those sight words. They have to remember them. And so extending that meager knowledge of words then shifts from remembering words to showing them how to solve and work with words and letters in words, okay? And so there's kind of two pieces to that, extending the meager knowledge of words, and then also the breaking words into letters and letter clusters, okay? And then we'll talk a little bit more about that. All kids need that. That is on my radar for every kid I work with. Okay, and I have to figure out ways to record it. I have to think about ways to remember that so that I know what they know, and I know that I'm continuing to lift it. Okay, but then there are also things that in word work that are next steps for this child. Okay, and those options we're going to talk about today are in chapter 5. That's the big reading chapter, and it's toward the end, and it's a whole section on working with words in isolation, okay? And so those decisions are made from observations of that child. Now, again, the other blue box is, I'm also personalizing it for that child, but I may not have to go through all the procedures that are options in chapter 5. Those are just places I go when I see a kiddo is grappling with a way of working with a word, right? So that is, these next steps for this child comes in later in lessons, where now they're up, they're taking words apart on the run. I'm watching, I'm seeing what they're doing, and then I have to go problem solve, because if he would just do this, or if he would just kind of have an opportunity to look at words this way, it would help him when he's on the run. Okay? Any questions so far about those? Kind of those two categories that we're going to talk about today? Okay, so let's start with important learning for all. Okay, extending a meager knowledge of words. Okay, and the place in the book that this is talked about, if you have your literacy lessons book, is on page 70 and 71. That's what I'm referring to in this section. Okay, and it says, the caterpillar saying, any work that children are asked to do with letters or words should arise from the text that they are working on, and not from the teacher's extensive knowledge of the English dictionary. Okay, meaning, and she says this all the time to us, we don't enter this with preconceived ideas of what they know, or, what they might need to know, 10 levels down the road. We need to think about what are they going to be encountering in text that they're dealing with right now. So what I would say about that is, if we're going to figure out how to extend their meager knowledge of words, we need to think about which words to teach, which words they're going to be bumping into. And where do we find that? We find that in the books that they read. Okay. And I have lots of different resources that I access, that I use. I'm going to show you something today that is one of the things I use, but I know teachers are also dipping into the word study resources from Jan Richardson. Okay, she's one of us. She's Reading Recovery. She knows the book set. She knows how those words are presented across text levels. Even last night, Jen Jones, who I follow on my social media, she just produced a resource for teachers where it breaks down high frequency words by text level again. And so what I kind of tried to do real quick was kind of gather some different resources and see how they compare. Like, if I have this list, is it pretty close? If I have this Dolch list, is it pretty close? And honestly, I would tell you they are. They are. So if you have resources out there that you're using, use those resources, and then make sure that you're also seeing them appear in books. And I think what you're going to see is that they do. So what I'm going to have you guys do is, in the chat, I'm going to give you access to a Jamboard. Okay, and I have 10 Jamboards set up. And what I'm going to have you do, and I think we'll just do this maybe, how many people do I have here? Oh, we're about 20, including me. So let's break into groups of, I'll probably have, I don't know, 3, it doesn't really matter, groups of 3 or 2 or 3. And on the Jamboard, what you're going to find is, and here, why don't I share that screen so you can just see it before we go there. Here's the Jamboard that you're gonna look at in just a second. Can you see that now? Is that coming up? A Jamboard there? Okay. So there are 10 of them. When you get your partner and you're in your breakout room and you click on this Jamboard, because it's going to be in the chat, you can just pick a Jamboard and jump on it, and if another group's on it, there's 10 of them, so there'll be plenty of places. But what I want you to do with your group is, I want you to take the words at the bottom and see if you can divide them on which would be a high frequency word at these different text levels. Okay. And just as a hint, there are 5 in each one. Okay, if that helps you. Okay, and I think it'll be more about the discussion than about necessarily getting the right answers. And I think you're going to be so proud of yourself for let's see here, for being able to do that. Okay, so let me go to chat. Okay, make sure that came through to everybody. And then if you can get it and open that up before I send you to your breakout room. Thumbs up from someone. Did they see that? Did that come through for you? Not yet. I will try to send it again.
I have the link,
have it,
Lori,
but mine
I
says
don't
access denied.
Same thing.
So it came through, but whoever created it didn't give you access. Well, that's not helpful, is it? Okay. Now try. Actually, I probably need to make you editors too, right? Right? There, I see you all popping on there now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we've got about 18 people here. I'll make 6 different groups. Okay. And we'll just do this. I can watch along with you guys, so I will.
22, bus 130 and bus 22.
So I will
this time. Thank you.
See when we're kind of finishing up. Okay, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about how easy that was, what your thinking was, how that kind of helped you. Okay, go ahead. And I just opened all rooms. Chanel, looks like you were sitting here by yourself. I'm like, oh, Chanel's in a room by herself. I'll go do this with her. How are you doing? I just have to ask. You're muted.
I'm good. It's just been a weird year. So
yeah.
I just started with kids actually 3 weeks ago because we lost so many of our at-home learners that they came back to school. So it was no
Okay.
longer a full-time job. So
Okay. Hey, well, that's good for kids that you're getting to work with them. So awesome.
but it just seems like they're so far behind. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, compared, it's already November and I'm still only on a level 3 with some of them. I
Mhm.
mean, oh my goodness. There's just so much backfilling we had to do.
Yeah. Well, and can you imagine in like my district where everybody was remote and then they come back to school and it's like, holy buckets, they are not, everybody's not where they need to be. And it's just,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah, I keep having nightmares about how we're going to get these kids. I mean, I'm just afraid they're going to be behind for the rest of their lives. I mean, I think the gap's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I worry because I mean, like, this isn't ending anytime soon that I see.
Right.
You
Right.
know, so it's like, it's not even like we could say, okay, now all hands on deck and go. And it's just like, whew. Yeah.
I know.
It does make me wonder when people say we should just have a gap year. If that, you know what I mean? Like if that really, but I mean, I know there are kids who don't need that either, but I don't know. Maybe they still could benefit from that. Here, I'm kind of looking at how people are doing.
I definitely, especially at our lower level. I mean, I think that's where we see it so much. Which board are you on?
I'm not on one. I was just kind of looking to see how fast people are going through. Some people are done and some people are just a few. So
you guys are back in school full time now, Lori, is that right or no?
No. And so here's what's happened for, sorry, I'll let you do this Jamboard some other time, but that's we're back hybrid. So there are some kids who stayed remote. Oh, there's some kids that stayed remote. And then there's some kids, you know, who came back, but they're AB days. So they're there 2 days a week. Okay. And so really some of our intervention kids have gone from having intervention every day.
Oh.
Now they're back in school. They have it twice and then possibly remote on Wednesday.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, what's the trade-off? The benefit of having them in person.
Right.
You know, and some of them weren't even ever getting on. So if they're in person 2 days, that's better. But hey, Nicole. I can't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. I just went to teach one and I popped back in.
Yay! Well, I was kind of looking. I don't where we are is they're on a Jamboard, and they're sorting words by what text level they think they kind of fall under. So I don't know in the chat if you see that Jamboard, the link to the Jamboard. And did that come up? Okay, there's some that are still, people haven't been working on them. They're all the same, but if you guys want to just jump on one, Chanel, I'll talk to you again.
That sounds good.
I'm going to make sure everybody's doing okay because now I got some text coming through, so something might be going on. Yeah, right. Okay. Oops. Okay. You guys got in there and those words were flying around. How'd you think you did? Pretty good? Any words harder than others? Okay, well, it looks like everybody's getting out of the breakout rooms now. So welcome back. Hopefully that was a chance to talk about these high frequency words that appear in books. And like I said, for the most part, all of the different resources I have found, they're pretty close in saying in text level 1, these are the words that are going to be reoccurring. In text level 2, you're going to see they're going to need to know these words in text levels 3 and 4. And so when you're taking a look at that, was there any that were, how did you handle it? What did you guys do to solve that? Let me put the answers up here. Now, am I back on my regular? All right. I don't know where my people went. Okay. There you are. Are you looking at my PowerPoint or are you still looking at the Jamboard? Sir, I just can't tell anymore. I don't know what I'm doing here.
The Jamboard.
Okay, that's not where I want you to be. No wonder you're like, what in the world? Can you give me the screen you want me to look at? Okay, that's the one I want you to look at. Okay, so now here we are. We took a look at those words, which words to teach, and this is how it landed. I'm not going to go back and check anybody's Jamboards. There's no prize, there's no penalty, but I'd love to hear, like how the conversation went. How were you able to do that? Was it easy for you? Was it familiar? Any surprises? Maybe those text level 1s and 2s were easy to whoop, 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 whoop. I'm putting those down there. I know they need those. Maybe a little bit harder to distinguish between text levels 5 and 6, 7 and 8. I don't know. Okay. Well, anyway, what I guess what I'm saying is whatever you're using, whether it be a resource like that or just the books themselves, that's where we get the words that we're working with kids during this extending a meager knowledge of words. Okay. And so, again, I also don't want you to think there has to be something special that somebody's created for this, because it truly is in the books. Just look at the books and you'll see the words that keep coming up over and over again in your book set. But the procedure for when you're wanting to teach that new word, when you're wanting to establish that with the child, is here on page 71. And so when you look at the bullets on page 71, this is how you do it. You tell him the word he's learning. We're going to learn that word here. You're seeing it a lot in your books. Let's learn it so you always know it. You write the word in big print as the child watches. Then ask the child to trace the word with his finger, saying the word slowly. Sound to print, not letter name to print. So he's going ear, and he's not going H-E-R-E. Does that make sense? Then we get out the magnetic letters. We pass them to him one at a time. He puts H up, he puts the E, the R, and the E. We ask him to construct that word, and then we do some mixing it and fixing it and getting it back in that right order. Again, when those magnetic letters are being used, remember that the H has to come first. If you see him grab for the E or the R or whatever else, then they got to do it again. Okay, we have got to get that serial order. We've got to get that sequence. And so that H has to be pulled down first. I've had to, like when kiddos are still struggling with this, I've had to take their hand, not during COVID time, and I've had to put my hand on theirs and reach for that H, because by golly, he wanted to reach for that E every time. And so I had to control that for him until that he wasn't going to reach for that. Okay. I might have to come in with my words, or very little words, but I might have to come in while after he's mixed it and say, find the H. You know, I might have to do some directing like that until we make sure that that order comes in every time. And again, you're going to do this multiple times. We're going to look for it in books. Those are other places we're going to do, but here's the procedure. And she even has examples on here on paintbrush and water, wet chalk, other things as well. But that's how we begin to make that word a word that we bring into their reading vocabulary. And she says too, if something is to be recognized again, it has to occur in different contexts. So you can do it there on the board, but if all they're going to do it is for 2 minutes on the board and then not see that word again the rest of the lesson, it's not going to stick. Okay. The other thing too, or I shouldn't say it that way, because you can do it and you can have another applied to the lesson. It still might not stick, Lori. It'll have that's your gateway to try to get it to stick more. So making sure that that's why, you know, we are intentional when we select familiar books. It's not just the book that was yesterday for running record and the one before that. I'm going to look back through his set and I'm going to find the book that has that word a lot. And I'm going to get that in front of him for familiar read. We're going to locate them afterward or before he reads. You know, I want a lot of attention to that word as that word he needs to know. In the new book, I'm going to choose a new book where that word is going to come in front of him again and again and again. And if I'm really good and the planets are lining up, if it could come up during the writing journal, I feel like I should get an award for that lesson, because that's pretty fantastic. But you can be thoughtful about it. You know, you could maybe come up with a sentence starter or something that might encourage the use of that word that you're bringing into that reading and writing vocabulary, right? So that is what Clay says about extending that meager knowledge of words. And so when we're thinking about words in isolation, that's where you go and that's where you think about what words I'm going to teach him and how I'm going to teach them. And then how to, you know, to keep them coming back up in continuous text. Any questions or thoughts about that? Might be something that you're very comfortable with. And again, what I think is interesting is in literacy lessons, you know, when they've got those procedures laid out, this extending a meager knowledge of words comes before the breaking we're going to talk about next, right? So I have to know if I've got a kiddo who does not have much of a reading vocabulary early on in lessons. Of course, we're getting letters and sounds as well, but I want to be beefing up that fast automaticity with sight words, because that's what's going to help them propel them, you know, into lots of things, cross-checking against known words, releasing the brain to solve words if they have good reading vocabulary. Okay, so get that under control and work and let that be a focus for you early on, and then continue as text levels change and new words need to become more of a focus. Okay, so I see I'm talking the day away again. So I'm going to move on to another section of important learning for all is this section on breaking words into letters and clusters, which is pages 72 and to 75. Okay. This is what I call non-negotiable. Everybody's getting, you know, I got this medicine out and everybody's getting a spoonful of this. Okay, and you're going to get it, and you're going to keep it. It's going to make you strong and healthy if you can break words into letters and clusters. And so if you open up to page 72, that's kind of the intro to that. But then hopefully sometime in your career, you have some way marked these steps, highlight them. I get them, mark them up. That's where I need to go. So you make sure that you have highlighted steps 1, 2, and 3, because this is what everybody's doing. Okay. And what we have to make sure we're doing is when we do these procedures, step 1, breaking the understanding that I can take words apart letter by letter. Okay. That when I look in the book, I know how to say it that way. Okay, so what I'm going to, and the same for step 2. Step 2 is really, we're not teaching inflectional endings in step 2. Step 2 is all about words can be broken into a big part that you know. Oh, and look, here's that ending. That's what we're looking for, is the idea of we've just broken everything out letter by letter. Now we're going to break off a big part that we know, and here's an ending for it. Okay? And we're going to work with that for a while. And then step 3 is, and we have the recommendation of not to move too soon to step 3. Let me admit someone real quick. Hold, please. Step 3 is all about words can be broken into 2 parts. And we're talking, all of this work is done around known words. Do you see kind of why that extending that meager knowledge of words has to get up in front of that? So that the words that they know are the ones we can learn these procedures on, and we can learn this type of foundational understanding of how words work. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I got to check my time. I'm going to toss you out into partner groups this time. And what I want you to do, and it's just going to be 5 or 10 minutes. This isn't going to be very long. I want you to look through those 3 steps. And I want you to practice those, or have one person read the words, have the other person make it and do the manipulating of letters. But I want you to remind yourself, you've read this, you do this every day, but I want you to look at the explicit language and see if you're holding true to that, or if you've diverted, or you're a little off north, or maybe, as my friend says, you're a bubble off plum, say, using that explicit language. Okay, so I'm going to pop you out into groups, practice those 3. And then if there's any takeaways you have, is there anything that you saw in there when you were practicing with a partner that you were like, oh wow, yeah, that's what I should be saying? Is there anything that was new or you want to draw attention to for the group? Okay, so off we go to, how many of you are here? I'll just put you back in those same groups. Okay, I'm gonna open your groups up again. You were working nicely in those. Sydney, I think I need you to, I need to assign you to a group, so I will. Okay. Let me. Okay. Thoughts or takeaways from exploring that part again? Is there anything you picked up on that you thought, oh yeah, I got to be more, I gotta get that straightened out, or any questions? Can anyone share maybe what your group was talking around? I'm gonna have to make it like the person with the shortest hair has to talk. You guys are so quiet online. That's what I miss about being together.
I thought it wasn't something that we talked about, but when we were going through the procedures on step 3, it was like the child can break it up any way that they choose. I didn't remember that part of the process, and so it's always good to review.
Yeah, okay, good. And I think it says, you know, like when you as the teacher always break it onset and rhyme, but like you said, again, don't hold them to that. Watch what they're doing, right? Good. Okay, so that was a good place to re-explore or think around again. What else? And you know, Crystal, when I think about you mentioning that, I also feel like some teachers that I have seen that are very intentional with word work as well. They teach it that way. They teach it with the onset and the rhyme, but then they do, once the child is pretty good with that, and we want them to be pulling that onset. You know, here's a word, you know, look. We can say that in two parts. Look. You know, and then now let's break it. Let's also remember the importance of them hearing that break first. Even if it means they're going to need to look at you, you know, and you break that out loud first with your voice. And then let's take a look at what that looks like when we break it out with the magnetic letters. But what I was going to mention about that is I've also had teachers who've done played with it a little bit, because we're still going to maintain left to right, but they go like that. Listen to this way. Look. And the child moves the L part over, and then they move over the K. Okay, so that's playing with that a little bit and letting them be a little bit flexible. I think about, you know, another example like, you know, they can break it. Ike, that's the onset rhyme. But over some time, you could say, hey, try to break it this way. Like, and see what they do. Because we do want that step is giving them exposure to the pieces, the rhymes, you know, that they're going to be learning and knowing. But we're not doing that to teach them the rhyme. That step there is to teach them to pull that and always work left to right across that word. Does that make sense? It's almost like they get the benefit of taking on different rhymes by doing that, but that's not the focus. That's not the focus, is to teach them the IG family. The focus is to teach them how to break a word. Okay? The IG family is going to come later. We're going to talk about that in options in chapter 5. Okay, but when you're working in step 3, it's not about the family, the whatever family you're working on. It's much more about the actual just breaking. And again, if it seems easy, that's okay. That's okay, because that's what we want it to be easy. We want them to get that fast looking across words, so that when they're in text and they pull that initial sound off, we want them to look continue looking through that word. Okay, that's the behavior. That's what we're wanting them to do. Any other takeaways from that section? Oh my gosh, I'm so slow. I'm so off kilter on time here. Dang it. But don't let that limit you. Here I'm complaining about the time, and then I'm wanting someone to talk. Okay.
We did talk about,
yeah,
what you said about one child might just be bound and determined to take the second or the third letter instead of doing it left to right. And it seems like my kids this year, because they ended up missing their whole last quarter of kindergarten, they were so much lower to begin with, were so much like would be stay 9-1 and so forth on the OS, and are much more like they'll want to just mix up the letters and say, you know, what word is that? What word is that? Instead of just listening and doing, you know, being more mature about it. They're wanting just to play with magnetic letters. And something else that I worry about is that when we go totally remote, is you can't reach across the screen and make sure that they get them back in left to right order and say no. Here starts with an H. You have to start with the H. The other thing is I noticed when I was looking at the children that are remote in first grade, one of the teaching things that the teacher had on there, she was showing a book and it was backwards. So I'm really, really worried because the left to right orientation is so foundational, so vital. I am really worried that we might think that we're doing a very, very precise, clear demonstration of how important it is to be left to right. And yes.
Well, and
Yes.
the not so funny, you are absolutely spot on about that online. And I'll tell you what happened to me was when I realized, when I had the aha moment that I better make sure that he's seeing that the right way. Here I am talking to somebody that I don't know if he sees things the right way. So I didn't know how to check against it. I was kind of like, is your mom anywhere there? I wanted mom to be able to come in, because I said to him, at first I'm like, does that look right to you? And he's looking at me like, well, it looks fine to me. I mean, I have no way to check that. So Angela, that's a great point when you're online. Yeah. And I think too, again, think about that we're almost having to really not rely, but I think what it's helping me do is realize how important demos are and demonstration and modeling. And yes, we do want them to do, we want them to have their hands on and things. And some of we can talk too about Jamboard and some other things people have found to use with magnetic letters and to do that type of word work or letter, word work. But also, if they have the letters, like my kiddos have the letters, so I tell them the letters to get, and then they have to tilt that down so that I can see. It's backwards for me when I'm watching what they're doing there, but I can see what they're doing. I usually have modeled it until they're about ready to lynch me, and they want to do that. But in that modeling, I'm making them stay with me. I'm making them say the sounds. You can tell what's nice is you can tell if they're looking at you or not at the screen. And so, but there is the challenge when we want to do some of this word work and things like that, that's harder online. Anything else from a group? I think one part I want to draw your attention to is in step number 2. Okay, so if you look at step number 2, and that's the part where you're going to break a single syllable word and its inflectional ending, and you're pulling out, go and look and all these different words that they are developing in their reading vocabulary. And hopefully you had a chance, and if you didn't get to practice it, I mean, nobody's above that. Get this out and practice it and get the wording right and explicit. But really the part that I want to draw your attention to is the last sentence before step number 3. And she's talking about how now you've done this, you've done it with the same word, have them, start throwing out some other words to give them, to give them that practice. But look at what she says here. She says, now he's probably ready to do this on a new word, one he is currently learning to recognize. And then it says, although children can hear final inflections and syllable breaks, as in shopping and played, it is probably too early for the child to use those sound signals to guide his word solving in reading. And I had Dr. Paparot explain that, or one of the ways to think around that as well. And what she's trying to say there is, again, we're trying to teach them how to pull that, to see, look, and then to look at looking, to get that direction, right? we should not expect them when they're reading and they come across a word like, well, maybe what's a word they don't, splashing, right? We don't necessarily want them jumping to the end and saying, ing, because now what have they just done? They've just jumped to the end. We're going against directionality now, okay? And so when they get to splashing or it gets hard, again, cover that up, let them, work with them to solve splash. Ta-da, now here's something you're familiar with, and there's ing. Or, you could say, if they come across splashing or something, you could say, the first part of that word is splash. Come in with it and then let them add that ending to it. But what she's saying is, don't expect that we've taught all these endings and that's how they're going to read a word now, because that is truly going against what we're going for. Okay, any other things? Okay, I know you're beginning to realize right now is it's almost 2:30. I'm realizing it, and I got a chunk that I want to talk to you about. We've talked about important learning for all. We've done those two big pieces, extending a meager knowledge of words, and we've talked about those step 1, step 2, step 3 procedures of breaking words into letters or breaking words into letter clusters. The part that I wanted to talk to you next about, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to save it until we meet again. And I think it'll be, if you are working with reading recovery kids, I think right now, this type of mindset and getting this concrete is very helpful. But what we're going to talk about next, let me just kind of show you, and we'll talk about this at our next session then. Let's just continue it on as opposed to trying to blow through it and not do it justice, because this is the part now where your expertise is going to come in full blown. That other part spelled out for us. We can do that. We can think about that. We can do that. This part's going to be where you're individualizing this for kids, and you're saying, I see you needing this type of word solving. I see you getting hung up here. I need to go into my book in chapter 5, pages 155 to 64. And I'm going to pull out some word work there that's going to help make this solving more explicit for you. Okay. And so that one, I really wanted to have an activity time where we first talk about all of the different word work. But then what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do like a flip flop. And I want us to think about, if I see them doing this somewhere in the lesson, this is some word study I could do with them. This is some word work, right? And so I think that's what we really need to have our focus on is 2 things. One, we just do. We're going to get solid on it with everyone. And the second half is, I see you doing this. I'm going to help you with this kind of word work. This word work is going to help you when you get stuck next time. Does that make sense? So I don't want to blow through that, because I think that's going to have some good conversation around it. What I think we could do though, and I don't have my tea party thing ahead right in front of me, so I didn't put down what date that is. But what I think we could do is also come to the session, if you're working with kids, even in small groups, think about what you're noticing about your kiddos that you're working with in terms of solving words, taking words apart on the run. Because that's what chapter 5, pages 155 to 161 is about. How are they taking apart words on the run? And how can I give them some teaching around that? And that's for reading and writing, right? It's going to benefit them both. So it might be something you see them doing in writing that you think, wow, we need to look at a word and look at how to take that word apart to solve it, or whatever. I don't want to give you ideas, but just kind of be looking for that. And if you notice it, jot a note to yourself, and then make sure you're the first one to share at our next session. Look at all of you are like, I'm not doing that, Lori. Anyway, one can always dream. You guys are also smart. I want you just to talk. But this is just not, so it's a great place for that. Okay, anything else? So we'll put that on hold. I hope you're okay with that. Just extending the word study, and then hopefully we'll have some time to talk about, hopefully this is helping you get your mind around and feel more confident in what you're doing and the decisions you're making.
Hey, Lori, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
It's Jody.
Yeah, hi, Jody.
So as far as I am continuing to go out in and out of quarantine, my students are. It has been quite the thrill ride over here in Germantown, and I'm just wanting to make sure when I am logging in my attendance reports that I'm logging them in the correct, like, do I count every time I see them, I count it as a lesson? It's just how I code it correctly?
Yes.
Or is it correctly? Is that correct? Yes.
You are correct. And this is great. Let me clarify this with everyone. I hope this will clarify your question. On your calendar report, you just keep on counting up. So when you started, you know, that was lesson 1. And every time you meet with that child in a reading recovery lesson, or you're working with them, you're going to count that as the next lesson. Okay. So you're just keeping that number going up.
Okay.
Let me also remind everyone that
you're not going to be getting my,
huh?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
We have new people too. We start with lesson 1. There's no difference anymore between roaming 1 and lesson 1. It's program. Our numbers go from 1, and then we just keep on going. Okay. So, but what Jody's asking about is, you're going to start, I think we're all going to experience this. You're going to start having a hodgepodge of in-person lessons and a hodgepodge of remote lessons. And there are 3 kinds of lessons that IDEC is going to want you. They're going to want you to take your calendar report. And if at the end of the lesson series, you say, I had 75 lessons with that child. Okay. Back when everybody was healthy, wealthy, and wise, I got 25 lessons that were what we call standard lessons. Oh gosh, now it's like standard, modified, and then remote. Standard means this, you could have beamed back to 1997, and it was a 30-minute lesson every day of the week, one-on-one. Modified means you're still in person, but you can't hold fast to all of the rules and regs of reading recovery lessons. So if it's only 20 minutes, if it's not every day, you know, whatever, or you can't get the lesson components and whatever, that's called a modified lesson. And then if you're remote, well, that's an easy one. If you're not with the child, you have to mark that as remote. So teachers who are experiencing that, what I'm learning from them are, on your calendar report, you might color code yourself. If you have a memory like a flea like me, you're not going to remember what you were doing on any given day. So when I put that lesson number in, if I saw the whites of that kiddo's eyes sit next to me, I'm marking it with a red because I know that I was in person with them. Okay. Then I have to say to myself, was it a true lesson or was it modified? Okay. So you're going to have to almost have ways of distinguishing those 3 types of lessons, because then on IDEC at the end of the time,
you're not going to get my calendar report for a couple of days.
That's okay. You giving me your calendar report is not a check-in on you. It's an opportunity for me to see if I need to reach out to you. Okay. I hope you all know that. Lori Stevens isn't grading you on your calendar reports. I'm using that to say, oh, I better ask her about him.
Okay. And then my next question, sorry guys, this is my last one then. We just met as a building on Friday, and their recommendation, because we have so many students and faculty that's in quarantine, some just in quarantine, some who have tested positive, that we should not be seeing any groups of kids for more than 15 minutes at a time. Like, it should really be like 14 minutes, you know what I mean? Like, because once you hit the 15-minute mark, if you have been with that person, then you're a close contact, you know what I mean, type of thing. So I didn't know if anybody else is dealing with this same, well, we all are dealing with it. I don't mean it like that, but anybody who is in person, like, I want to try and keep my 30-minute lessons so I can make these legit lessons, but I guess I'm struggling to decide what's the best thing to do at this point, you know what I mean, type of thing. So.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts?
Anybody?
You're kind of like charting new territory here for us. Thanks, Jody. I guess my initial what?
Go ahead.
I think my initial thinking is you just mark that as a modified lesson and you see them for 14 minutes and 59 seconds.
Okay.
And
yeah, okay.
Not ideal. Not
is
ideal.
That what your recommendation would be?
I mean, I don't think it's I think it's your only option. I mean, what else could you do?
Okay.
I mean, because I think if you pull them later, it's a combined time.
Well, and I was thinking, like, even if I was just trying to get creative with my because I mean, you're really on top of them the entire time. They're on top of you, you know what I mean? But I feel like the writing portion is when you're extremely close because you're coming in and out, you know what I mean, as much as you are. So I didn't know if I could just maybe sit with that person, with my kiddo for that 10 minutes for the writing, but then like stand up and be like more like the 6 feet away from them type of thing. You know, it gets to the point then where it's getting technical and it's just annoying.
Well,
you know
and I guess that would be, I guess that would be mean, if you're out of 6 feet, you know, you're going to be, it's going to be a little, but you could have your own book. And if they have their own book, you can prompt from, I mean, it's like I said, let's go to the closet of bad ideas here and see what we find. It's really more the legalese of.
I just didn't know if there was.
I don't know. Has anyone else had?
Yes.
Mary, do you have to do anything like that with your kiddo? Mary, are you in person? And do you have any restrictions like that?
Not right now, but I basically only have my kids I have one half-an-hour slot and 2 20-minute slots. So one person gets a true reading recovery, the other 2 get modified.
Mm-hmm. And again, I think, again, you do what's important and what you have to do in your school. And again, it is a matter of prioritizing to the extreme. I mean, this is, and like you said, Angela, maybe this is getting us really good at finding that focus and having the forced opportunity to do that. But yeah. So there's not an answer. I'm sorry, Jody. We're going to have lots of options, but no answer. Kind of like word work. Lots of options, no answer. Right? Anything else from anyone? Everyone's doing good? You're at least here. You're smiling. You can be torn apart inside, but you're making my day. Just let me see you for a little bit. So stay in touch if you have kiddos that you want me to talk around with you. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be anything grandiose. If you just need somebody to talk about how to make sense of any of this, I have lots of people reaching out, and that's perfect. That's perfect. That's what I want to be here for you, to be able to do that. So no question is too small. Keeps me finding out how things are going in different places and all of that. But keep on doing your important work, and it is all good. It's all good, you being with kids, either in person or through a screen. You are good for kids. Anything else? People have kind of been dropping off. That's fine. If anyone has individual questions and you want to stay around, otherwise, it's still a beautiful day. Look at my Oakdale girls are outside enjoying the fresh air. I love it. Anything else? Okay. And I can stop recording if you don't want to record it, what you want to ask. I'll do that first. Maybe someone's like, I don't want to share. You're recording this. Stop